So, do you like shopping at thrift stores, but hate the fact that you can't really try much on? And then when you get home, you find out nothing fits? Well, today we're going to talk about something that probably a lot of you sewists out there avoid, and that's alterations. So, it's been a year since my last video on alterations, and as usual, there have been things that have come to live in my closet that are waiting to be altered, all because I love to shop at thrift stores. And here in Central Florida, we have some really good ones. Their prices are pretty low and they have great sales throughout the year. Except for Goodwill. Their prices have gotten so high for things that have been donated to them for free. It's like shopping at Walmart. Even if they have certain color tagged clothing 50% off, it's not worth it. And so I just don't shop there anymore. And without being able to try anything on until I get home, some things have come to live in my closet waiting to be altered. And yes, that's the risk of shopping at thrift stores, of not being able to try anything on, as a lot of thrift stores do not have fitting rooms. Now, what I would suggest, weather permitting, and if you can, to wear tight clothing. That way you can actually try clothing on over top of your clothes and see if they fit. As long as you're not getting down to your underwear, the people that work at the thrift stores or other people aren't going to care if you're trying things on in the middle of the aisle. I've seen other people do it, and I've done it myself. Otherwise, you're just going to have to decide whether or not the clothes that you're looking at are the right size for you to buy. Now, as a person who used to do alterations for a living, and if I have a garment that I have purchased that does not fit, I have to decide whether or not I love it enough to put my time and effort into altering it so that it does fit. Do I need to use other materials? Or is it something that I can use in another project? Or do I need to just donate it and cut my loss? Now, depending on your sewing ability, if there's something that doesn't fit quite right, would you be able to alter it? Is it worth it for the cost of the garment to then go home and have to spend time in altering the garment to make it fit you? If yes, then by all means, purchase the garment and take it home and alter it. Or maybe you're in love with it so much and you don't really know how to sew, or you don't have the ability, but you can go to a local tailor and have it altered. But that also means there's an additional cost in the total cost of the garment. It all depends on how much you want to spend on a particular garment. This is a small, and normally something like this is going to fit me. But as you can see, this is a very tight-fitting small and does not fit. But I love this top so much that I'm going to take the time to alter it by opening up the seam all the way down the arm and through the sides and add some stretch knit fabric to make it fit. This top is an example of me debating on whether or not I'm going to alter it to fix what doesn't fit on it. And that's the fact that this neckline is very open and you can see my bra. And to fix it, I need to take up the shoulders. To do that, I need to take off the sleeves and take off the neck binding all the way around the back. Now, do I like this top enough to do that? Yes, I do, because the rest of it fits and I really like the cute saying on the front. It's kind of the same thing with these tights. They fit great, except the waist is too big, so they constantly feel like they want to fall down. And in order to do that, I need to take the band apart enough so that I can get this flipped inside out to take it in. And I'm also going to try to add pockets on the front because I want to be able to carry my phone because I walk a lot in the morning. I also found these two shirts, which I really like, but they are larger sizes, so it's going to take some work to downsize them to fit me. I also have a really cool project to make with this black sweatshirt to combine it with this blue plaid shirt. So let's get started on those alterations. And I'm starting with the blue and purple top. When I take things apart, I do not like to cut my seams. The shirt is already too small and I want every bit of seam allowance there is. And on a seam that is serged, that is very easy to take apart because you just pull the main two threads and the rest of it unravels. I'm using a cotton jersey as my extra fabric that I bought from my local fabric store. And I only got a yard of it because it is a 4-way stretch, and so I can cut what I need across the grain. Now I want the bottom half of the strip to taper out and then down to a point at the sides. And I'm cutting the rest of the strip roughly 2 inches because this top is very tight. Now you can use a serger to sew this together, but I want to make sure my seams are secure. So I'm sewing it with a straight stitch first, and then finishing off the seam allowance with my serger. And now it's on to the hems. On the sleeve, I decided to just cut the extra fabric off the top and leave it a raw edge, just like the shirt is. On the hem, they used what's known as a cover stitch. That's the machine that sews the 2 rows of stitching, and the threads on the underside, all this zigzag, catches the raw edge of the fabric and encloses it for a nice hem. I happen to have a cover stitch. Do you have to have one of these? No, you don't. I needed it as a professional seamstress because at the time, there were so many prom dresses that I was hemming, and they were all made out of a stretch polyester fabric. And so this cover stitch was a must. It's one of those machines like a serger machine that makes a really good investment if you're doing a lot of work with stretch knits, but it's not necessary. You can just sew your hems with 2 rows of stitching. The inside does not have to be caught like that. Or if you have a serger, serge the raw edge first and then sew it twice with your machine. A cover stitch machine is a convenience, and I will use it from time to time. I am far from perfect at using it, but it does a nice job with hems on stretchy fabric. And now my top is finished. What do you think? I really like the extension in the sides, and it goes well with the style of the shirt. There is only one problem, and that is these sleeves are super long with its extra extension, and so I decided to cut it off. I do like things that come down over my hand, but this is just way too much. I also wanted to mention that I took the neckline in just slightly. After adding the strip of fabric down the sides, the top fit a lot looser. And since I wasn't lifting the shoulders in any way, I needed to just shrink the neckline just slightly. And so I took it in at an angle and just serged off the extra. And now it fits a lot better. Well, that's one alteration down. Onto the white shirt. In order to shrink the neckline, I need to lift the shoulders like this. And I know that with the neckband and the sleeves, this all may seem like a daunting alteration, but actually it's not that complicated if you take it step by step. And the first thing you need to do before removing your sleeves, you need to mark the shoulder seam at the top of your sleeve. That way, when you go to set the sleeve back in, you know where to line up your sleeve at. You also need to mark one of your sleeves so that you know which one is right or left when you go to set them back in. After removing the sleeves, try your top on and pin your shoulders, taking up only the extra fabric. Don't grab it and pull, as that will be too tight. And it's okay if you pin more on one side versus the other, as our bodies are not symmetrical from left to right. If your armhole is gaping open, you can fix that by adding a bust dart, which will close up the armhole for a better fit. Now, once you sew in your bust dart, the next thing you're going to do is remove the binding from the back of your neckline. Because when you alter your shoulders, you're going to sew from the armhole across to the neckline. This is definitely not going to line up. And then when it's sewn, you're going to cut the back of the neck down and put the band back on. Now, I know you might be thinking, well, why can't I just stretch the front of it to match the back? And this is going to cause a lot of warping, and you don't want to do that. And now I've trimmed off the excess on the shoulder seam. And what you're going to do is then you're going to measure how much space there is here, and that's how much you're going to cut down the back of your neck. To sew your sleeves back in, pin the center point of the sleeve to the shoulder seam and the underarm and side seams together. My sleeves were snug to begin with, so I won't have to do much easing for it to fit the armhole. But if you ever have one side of the fabric slightly bigger than the other, flip your garment over because the feed dogs will push along the extra fabric for a nice flat seam. When you re-sew the neck binding back on, you need to pull it slightly as you pin it to the neck opening so that the neckline doesn't stretch out and pucker for a smooth, flat finish. The ends of the neck binding were just overlapped, but I'm going to sew the two ends together. I cut off the excess and turned the seam to the inside for a much nicer finish. And there we are, all done. I think this fits pretty good. I like the way the neckline is much more closed. The back band lays nice and flat. And I think with the bust dart and taking it up at the shoulders, the armhole fits much better. And now I can be so fancy. And I think next we're going to do this fun project with the sweatshirt. Now, if you follow me for any length of time here on YouTube, you will notice that I don't like boring clothing. And this sweatshirt project was an inspiration from a content creator I follow on Instagram and TikTok, and her name is Maddie Mac Fashions. And on her channel, she gives really simple tutorials on how she makes her sweatshirt combinations. To do this, you need 3 things. 1, a sweatshirt. I found this from the thrift store, and mine has a hoodie, but you don't necessarily have to have one that does. 2, you need some sort of a t-shirt logo that you like because we're going to be applying this to the front of the sweatshirt. And 3, you will need a plaid shirt that will somehow color coordinate with your logo and your sweatshirt. And I think it does because it's got a nice red stripe and it also has a black stripe, so these all 3 go well together. Step 1. Cut off the band from the bottom of the sweatshirt and then trim off the extra seam allowance. Step 2. Lay your sweatshirt out flat and cut down the right and left side in a straight line from about the mid-shoulder point down to the bottom. Just be sure to leave enough room next to the pocket on the front. Step 3. Cut off the sleeve cuffs and trim off the seam allowance. Step 4. Button up your plaid shirt and lay it out flat, and cut it like you did your sweatshirt. And then cut off the shirt cuffs as well. Step 5. Now we work on the t-shirt logo, and I'm using a Heat and Bond soft stretch iron-on adhesive to iron on the back. I then give it a bit of a trim and peel off the backing so I can press it to my sweatshirt. And I'm using my sweatshirt as a pressing cloth. To be sure it's secure, I'm stitching around the logo with a matching red thread. Step 6. You sew the plaid shirt sleeves to the sweatshirt body by pinning the shoulders together and down the front and back. I'm using my serger to sew these together, but you can sew it on a regular sewing machine. I just find it faster and neater using my serger. Step 7. Cut the bottom of the plaid shirt off in a straight line and pin on your band from the sweatshirt bottom. Divide it into 4 quadrants, pinning the sides, center front, and center back. You will then stretch the band as you sew it on to the shirt bottom. And lastly, step 8. Turn your sweatshirt inside out and sew the split on the sleeves together. Insert one of the sweatshirt cuffs and sew it together. And just like that, my sweatshirt is now been upcycled. No, this really wasn't an alteration. It was, in the sense that I upcycled it to fit the way I wanted it to look. Now, if it will just stay cold enough in Florida for me to wear it, that would be great. On to my tights, and I've gone back and forth whether or not I wanted to alter these. I'm taking the waist in this much on each side, about 3/4 of an inch at the top, and down to 0 at the seam. Why my hesitation? It's because of this seam, which is sewn together, then serged, then cover stitched. I just have to open up the seam this much so I can turn the band inside out. Now a cover stitch is basically a chain stitch, and to remove it, you need to first pull out about 1/2 inch of stitches. Then turn your garment over, and you should be able to pull the thread that is loosened, that is the chain of the stitch. Now I can remove the serger stitching, which, as all of you know, you just have to pull the 2 main threads and the rest of the loops come right off. Now my band is free and I can flip it inside out to alter the waist. And I am not removing the elastic or taking this waist seam apart. I'm just folding it over and stitching right through it. I am going to clip the seam allowance so it will lay flat when I take in the seams. My sewing tip of the day: use clay chalk to mark your garments. I don't use wax chalk as it can leave a residue on certain fabrics, and why I highly recommend clay chalk. Once the waistband is taken in, I'm going to open up the seam allowance and press it flat, which will help the waistband to lay flat when I flip it right side out. Now, for those of you watching who don't have a serger or a cover stitch machine, I'm going to show you that you can put this back together without either of those machines. And that is done simply by sewing the waistband back onto the tights and then folding the seam up and sewing a double row of stitching where the original stitching was. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I am adding pockets to the sides of my tights, and to do that, I will be using my cover stitch machine to sew them on. I'm using the same cotton jersey I used with my purple top, and I start by hemming the top edge. To sew the pocket to my tights, I just pin them in place. Turn my tights inside out because it is best to sew inside the tube. And then just sew it down, doing my best to catch the edge of the fabric with the double row of stitching. If I wanted to get super crazy, I suppose I could sew from the inside out. That way the decorative zigzag stitching would be on the outside of my tights. But I'm not worried about that. I'm only concerned that the pockets stay in place. And there we are, pockets, both sides. I even added them to another pair of tights that I have that does not have a pocket on the leg. So does my phone actually fit in said pocket? And yes, my tights fit a lot better now that I've taken them in, but no, I'm not going to try them on. So this is the first of the two tops that I have left. This is an extra large. And after staring at myself in the mirror for a while and testing out a few things, I think I know how I'm going to be able to downsize this to fit me. I need to take up the shoulders a good 2 inches, and then that brings everything up and fits my silhouette a lot nicer. It takes the open neckline and lifts it up and closes it, which I really like, and the length of it is much better. The only thing I don't like are these sleeves. I'm going to remove them and then refit it to see how open this armhole is, because I think what I'm going to try to do is make it sleeveless. And before I can take up the shoulders, I need to remove the band from the back of the neck because just like my white top, when I take up the shoulders, the front and back neckline will not line up because I'm sewing from the armhole over to the neckline. Once my shoulder seam is trimmed off, I can cut down the excess off the back of the neck opening. Now I did have to go back and reopen the shoulder seam just a bit at the neckline so I can reattach the neck binding. Well, this fits a lot better, but it's very open on the sides. So in order to make this sleeveless, I need to take it in here at the top, down the sides to about this point. But I don't want to take it in through here because this fits nice and I don't want it to get too tight across my hips or my tummy. I also need to cut away a lot of this on the shoulder so that it fits right across the crown of my shoulder. To finish off my armholes, I'm using the sleeves to cut bias strips for a binding. As long as you have a straight edge, whether down or across the grain of your fabric, you can find your bias or diagonal cut line. I have this very handy ruler that is see-through, and all I have to do is line up the straight edge with the corner point of these 1-inch squares. When you cut bias strips, you sew them together on the straight, which looks diagonal when it's finished. I did cut off the extra part of the sleeve that wasn't the paisley print. And these strips are cut 1 1/4 inch wide. I then fold in the sides to meet in the middle and press it flat. Then I fold it in half and press it again. And just like the shoulder seam, I opened up the side seam after taking it in, so I can insert the ends of the binding as I wrap the armhole opening. And I think this looks 1,000 times better and much cuter. And it even has pockets. Which brings us to the last and final garment. This top is a 2X large. And after fussing at it and pulling it and pinning it, I have decided not to alter it. It's very open and I would have to pull it way up and reshape the whole collar. I love the texture and the cotton fabric, but for me, this is a game changer. I thought about maybe trying to wear it like a beach cover up, but I feel very trapped in all of this fabric and it would just be too hot. So I'm going to cut my losses and donate it, which really isn't a big loss because I got this free at a yard sale, so I got it for nothing. So let's do a recap. When it comes to altering your clothes, no matter where you buy them from, it depends on whether or not you want to put the time and effort into altering them. Or do you have the skill level needed to do so? It also takes knowing whether or not you need other materials to upcycle it into something new. If you're able to alter your clothing, but it seems very overwhelming, you just need to take it step by step and alter one section at a time. Because usually when you do one thing, something else will happen. Maybe you can transform something simple into something completely different by combining it with other garments. By doing this, you give it your own style and flair and create something unique all your own. Alterations can also mean things that you do for yourself that help you on a day-to-day basis. And they don't have to be perfectly done, they just have to be practical. Once you start altering your clothes, you will then start to see the potential that each garment has just by looking at it. And the result can transform anything funky into something with style. But the main key when it comes to altering your clothes is knowing whether or not something can or cannot be altered. There may be things that you love about a garment, but it's just the wrong cut, and it really wouldn't turn out well if you did try to alter it, and it's okay to say no. It's okay to donate things that you just don't want to alter or you can't alter. Well, that about wraps it up on this video all about alterations, because I think this video has gone on long enough. I hope this video inspires you to rethink some things in your wardrobe that have been hiding away that could use some alterations. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned as the sewing madness continues.